Welcome to this space. We're so excited to have you all here today. I'm Latanya, also known as LT, and I'm happy to share this space. It's really meant to be a conversation, and I'm so excited. I'll pass the mic over to Mary in a second, but it's so excited to have Mary here. Um, I guess we're going with she's a Scottie Pippen to my Michael Jordan. We'll see how long that analogy lasts. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm a co-founder of the Empowering First Generation College Students Facebook group, now 7,200 members strong. Um, so I think many of you are in that group. And also adjunct faculty member in Department of Ed Leadership at Santa Clara University here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Um, what else do I want to say about myself? Got a new job, y'all. uh, I gotta remember my title, Director of Sales and University Partnerships. You know how it is. You're like, you don't know your email, you don't know nothing. Director of Sales and University Partnerships at Re-Up Education, and founder of the Black First Gen Collective, and founder of First Gen and Juice. Again, welcome to this space. Thank you, Armana. So glad to see you, Cynthia. And let me pass this over to Mary to introduce herself.
Have y'all seen the TikTok? I'm going to pass this video over to. Welcome for us. Good afternoon. So glad everybody's here. We know that this is going to be the start of a very important conversation within the first gen space. And I'm just so excited to be a part of it. And I want to thank LT when she talks about her Scotty to her Michael Jordan. The thing is that that's so true in how we work together. And it's so true in how we've become friends too. She's just such an incredible friend to me. And we've become NASPA buddies and all kind of buddies. So thank you, LT, for inviting me into this space. My name is Mary Wallace, and I identify as a first gen professional. I went to school back in the 80s, and there wasn't much for first gen students, or at least you really had to search. I am a TRIO student, but I didn't even really know what TRIO was until I started working in Upward Bound in the second year of my career. And so, absolutely we learn those things as we navigate our pathways. I work at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Student Experience. Part of my role right now, I have a lot of different hats I wear, but one of the hats I wear, and I'm so excited to be a part of, is that I do wear the hat to start the first gen initiatives beyond TRIO at UAB. And in fact, January 19th, we did some first gen celebration, which was very cool and very outward focused. We brought Dasha Palenko in. If at your university you need a first gen speaker that has name recognition and is as cool as a cucumber, please invite Dasha. She's incredible. One of the things our Latinx students told us when they left the auditorium is we didn't know that we were seen at this university, and y'all brought Dasha in, and then we felt seen and heard. And she's incredible. She stayed in our auditorium until she met every single person in the auditorium. Everybody had a chance to take a picture with her or whatnot. So just a big shout out to Dasha Palenko. But on January 19th, we're also launching our first gen faculty and staff initiatives, which is really where my heart is at. So my doctorate is in workforce development. And what better way for me to spend the time, the last part of my career, than to really look at first gen professionals and how we navigate the world of work. In fact, I was able to be a part of a project and edited the book, First Gen Professionals in Higher Education. Strategies for the World of Work. So if you haven't gotten your copy of this, this is through the NASPA bookstore. And LT was one of the authors. There were 14 other authors, including a first-gen college president. So it's really an incredible book that tackles some of the things that we think of as first-gen professionals. So to me, this is an extension of that conversation to get it going again. So
Thanks, Mary. And speaking of extension, I can talk a little bit about how we got to this place. It's really exciting to say, oh, this conversation is being sponsored by something, right? And that is two things: the Empowering First Gen group that I mentioned, and if you're not part of it, I can actually add a link in the chat. Um, again, that's over 7,200 folks from all over the world, honestly. And there's some really great conversations in that group, but we realize that sometimes it's just a post and they go by really quickly. And so we actually, thanks to a lot of prodding and poking by Nick, who just joined, was like, hey, what about having some of these conversations off, outside of that space, right? Not just a post, an actual discussion. And so that has led to the partnership that we now have with A Better Day Groups, where we will be taking some of those themes and hot topics and having like real time conversations like this one here. And I had posted in a group maybe a couple months ago, just asking people what kind of topic would they want to talk about. And let me tell you, this idea of being a first gen professional is just it's hot right now. It's really important. A year ago, I think many of us grown folks were walking around saying, I'm a first generation college student, right? Like we didn't even have a language for saying that we had already graduated and we were still saying we were a first gen student. And so it's so great to have another identity to hold on to because we all know, I don't know if you can see it on my shirt, first gen forever. It doesn't just go away. So it's great to have you all here and have this conversation. I knew one of the the first person I wanted to talk to bring this in to get this going was Mary. And even as we were brainstorming, and listen, we don't have a whole formal agenda. You all are, by virtue of being here today, will help shape what we do going forward. To be honest, like how often do we talk, and what do you want to talk about? But one of the first things that Mary said, and just stopped us all in our tracks, was she wanted to focus on first gens as influencers, and we're just like. "Arr!" So Mary, I'm going to toss this back to you. Can you say a little bit more, like what was in your mind? What are you thinking? And I know we want to open it up after that.
yeah, sure. Well, I just got the chill bumps when LT just said that. We hear a lot about talking about first gen students with asset based language, but a lot of the narrative I'm still hearing is they didn't know, or they don't know how to navigate, or their families were poor, so they didn't know, all of that kind of stuff. That still falls under that deficit language and understanding of the first gen identity. And what I am also hearing some of that in the first gen professional space. And I look at this platform, you guys, and I think about the folks who wrote pieces in the book. I think about Shakima, who has joined us, who is doing an incredible research project that is her dissertation that I am really going to encourage her to publish because it reshapes the narrative so strongly for first generation professionals to an asset-based influencing narrative. So when I think about my journey, and when I think about other folks who I've been on their journey or I've watched their journey, and I see them become presidents of universities or vice presidents, or like my sister in the private sector as a nurse, and the ways in which she climbed in her career and is now developing projects for the state of Louisiana about first gen nurses. All of these things, I think we can easily shift and shape the narrative in our own voice about being an influencer. And one of the things that I think we put in the marketing for this was an influencer, maybe not a social media influencer, but maybe you are. But certainly there are spaces where you are leaving a legacy, you're leaving a mark. A mark is being left on you, you're being reshaped, reformed, and really tackling a lot of the things that we hear in deficit language. So one of the things that we talk a lot about it in the book project we did was imposter syndrome. If you read chapter 2 of the book, it knocks imposter syndrome on its booty, and so it's really important that we keep talking about those things so that we can claim those spaces, and reshape the narrative. And so that's where that came from. And then I started to think, well, where are we influencing, right? And so in industries, certainly, I think about my husband. He's a first gen, he's an insurance agent, and he does things a little bit differently than his continuing generation colleagues. He just does. And that comes from his background of being first gen. I think about the way we influence work culture, we influence networks, we influence our career mobility, both for ourselves, but in a big way for other people as well. We are influencing and being influenced by our families. And I know that it's not a monolith that we all come from the same types of families. And sometimes there are families that, don't add up in different ways or have different dynamics. But I hear the first gen family story as a family, the family unit being something of strength, and the way in which people sacrificed. And so that's really important for us to think about and to continue to write about. And I also think that one of the things I said in the book is that a lot of people research first gen students. Some of those folks who are doing research on first gen students are first gen, and some of them are not. But the first gen professional research, the first gen professional, that narrative, that research, that line has to be shaped and formed by first gen professionals. And so I want to claim that for our group. I want all of us to claim that and move forward. So that's why LT.
Well, Mary, I remember you had wanted to hear from the folks here
Yeah.
about their thoughts about
Yeah.
influencer.
So the first question I'd like to just throw out to everybody here is, first of all, I'd love if everybody answers this, but if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. But I'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell us where you're at, and then to answer this question for us. How have you been a first gen influencer? And I can call on people, but also I'm the kind of person, if you want to jump in, just jump in. Shakeem.
All right, I'll go ahead and start. Hi, everyone. My name is Shakima Clancy. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm located in Hackensack, New Jersey. And one of the ways in which I've become an influencer, never thought of myself in this way. So this is new language or a new title. But previously, I worked at Cornell University and had the opportunity to connect with many influential donors who had an interest in contributing to supporting first gen efforts and initiatives. And while that was great, many did not identify as first gen and had negative perceptions about who first gen students are. And so I seized the moment to re-educate another generation of folks who have the potential and the ability to move in and out of other spaces. And so by helping them become more informed about the strengths and assets and the unique experiences that first gen students bring, I'm hopeful that they're leveraging their network through their work with Deutsche Bank or other influential companies. Names don't come to my mind, to sort of open up pipelines for more first gen students to be considered for those types of positions. So that's something I think that's a tangible way in which I'm attempting to be an influencer.
Shakima, thank you so much. I also think your research is going to influence quite a bit.
Yeah, gotta finish it though, right?
I know, I know. Who else
All right.
wants to answer that question? How have you been a first gen influencer?
I'll share. Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Okay,
Thank you.
hey.
And thank you.
This
And feel free to for folks to post in the chat too, just as Cynthia has done. Go for it, Patricia.
I was trying to put my camera on, but my iPad's acting kind of crazy, so I'll just leave it for now. But I am a former admissions manager at the University College of the Cayman Islands. I have recently relocated back to the States, and my dissertation was on sense of belonging for dual enrollment students and their culturally engaging campus environments. And what I found now that I'm looking back at my research, that the students I did interview were a lot of first gen students in the Caribbean. And hearing their stories, they tell me that hearing their stories through the interviews really sparked something inside of me. And I even then, that was about a year and a half ago, I still didn't identify as a first gen professional, I guess now we're calling it, right? So I had that aha moment last summer at a conference, and I've really just been working with them as far as letting them feel their belonging on campus in the Caribbean. And so as I'm moving forward, I want to continue to do that. You know, I want to continue to be that voice for them and to help them navigate the system and help them navigate areas where people may shy away from, but I want them to feel that they belong on whatever campus that they're on, and that they have a voice and they have somebody who is hearing them at this time as they're navigating through college. I didn't have that when I did my undergrad work, even my graduate work actually too. So I want to give back what I didn't have, and so I'm looking to expand my research, and as you're mentioning, going into more aspects of focusing more on first gen and the different arenas that they have available to them.
I love that, Patricia. What I got from you saying that too is that sense of voice, and that's really what first gen professional, we wanted to make sure that the voice was correct, right? Like that it wasn't
Yes.
something that somebody was writing about us. It was something we were writing about ourselves, and we were weaving in our stories. So that idea of voice is so important in this work.
Thank you.
Who else? Cynthia, I do want to give a shout out to Cynthia in the chat. LT mentioned that Cynthia had posted a comment. She talked really, one of the things that she's talking about is the inequitable organizational culture. And I think it's really important for us to remember that we are in spaces that have systems that are created for certain types of students. And systemic change is needed. And so a shout out to the Center for First Generation College Student Success. They really think in that networked university approach in which systems, policies, resource flows, relationships, mental models, those things have to change in order to have a holistic system of support for not just first gen, but our minoritized students, our indigenous students, all sorts of students who universities were not created for. Thank you for that, Cynthia.
Mary, I'm happy to go next. If I will also be heading out soon, so this opportunity to go next. Hi, folks. My name is Eric. My background is in affordable housing finance, affordable housing developments. But I'm a first-gen professional, and so when I was doing my graduate studies a couple of years ago, I graduated back in 2020. I realized there weren't a lot of first-gen students applying and getting into grad school, and so I worked with a couple of my first-gen colleagues, classmates, to develop a program to help first-gen students apply to grad school. There's a lot of support around the country helping first-gen students apply to college, but there's really not that much support, as we know, for what the next step is, right? And so because we have taken some classes on coaching, on mentoring, and then fuse that with some, with some of my colleagues who are really good at facilitation and things like that. So we, created a curriculum to help train folks, explain grad school, explain the graduate school application process, help build narratives, and help apply from a position of strength, and leveraging stories. And so we've been doing that now for about 2 to 3 years. We're a small team. We've only worked with, close to 75 students. We're looking to do more, and we're looking to partner with universities and other. And we started building partnerships with college prep organizations that have been in existence for some time now, and have alums who are now looking for the next step after they've graduated from college. So anyway, so that's how we've been looking to be influencers and help more people get into navigate the professional workforce.
That's incredible. Again, back in the 80s, we didn't have a lot of navigational support in colleges and universities. Now there are so many things for first-gen students that often those supports get exhausted. And then as people transition to the workforce, it's like, okay, we taught you, you're good to go. Let's wind you up and let you go. But we all know that the experience in navigating the work culture is very different for us. And so I think that's incredible work, Eric. Thank you. Who's next?
I can go. My name is Isabel. I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I work at UT Austin as part of some of our, half of my job is first gen events, and the other half of my job is being a program coordinator for a couple different scholarship programs. And it definitely took me a little bit to think about this, but I think that I've been a first gen influencer in the sense that during first gen week, for the very first time, we actually put on a breakfast for our first gen staff and faculty on campus. And that was honestly so exciting. It was one of the easiest things that I've ever had to plan out of all of the things that I've had to plan. But I worked with our different university resource groups. A couple, we have Hispanic Faculty and Staff Association, Black Faculty and Staff Association. We have a Pride and Equity, an Asian American. And we actually just recently had one start for military veterans and their families. So it was really exciting just to be able to have people from these groups who are very often first gen, for all of us to just get together and just have breakfast on a morning before everybody had to run to their meetings. It was super low key, but it was really nice, and I got really, really, really great feedback. So I'm really looking forward to doing it in the future, and maybe even finding out like what other things we can do on campus.
Food brings us all together. Thank you, Isabel. Next.
I can jump in and go next. My name is Mito Diaz Espinosa. I worked for about 20 years in higher ed in different spaces up until about 6 months ago. Now I am equity program manager at a federally qualified health clinic. One of my jobs early on was at a community college, and I'm in Waco, Texas, was at McLennan Community College. And toward the end of my time there, I helped and was one of the persons that built our first gen program, our scholarship program there, which kind of propelled me to go back to graduate school, and then ultimately ended up in a Ph.D. program. My research is on Latino males and their motivation to go to college. And then I came back and started working at Baylor University here in Waco as the first professional staff member of that first gen program. So I still have a lot of connections at both the community college MCC and at Baylor and their first gen programs. So I often go and speak at the Men of Color program at the community college, or the HSAs, or with our first in line programs, just kind of sharing my story and talking about, because I feel like that's a way to kind of tell people, hey, I did this, and all my pitfalls and what we do in working with first gen students. But now, since I'm out of the higher ed space, one of the ways that I am an influencer is I basically do research and through my community work and also my professional work, I try to capture people's stories and grab people who were first gen folks, and then kind of have this in my mind Rolodex of folks that I can connect students with. So when I go back and speak at the first gen programs, last summer, an example of this, had a young lady who got her master's of accountancy. She was really nervous about going. She got a big time job in Houston at one of the big 4 accounting firms, but she was scared to go as a Latina and being in accounting, and it was just hard for her. But I had met somebody who was an accountant who's Latina here in the community work, who was also a first gen student, who was the first in her family to do anything like that. So I connected them together on an individual basis, and she was able to kind of coach her and mentor her, and now they've become really close through that. But just bringing other people, especially in the medical field now, because so many first gen students think they want to be doctors and think that's the way they're going to be rich and famous and all the things. So bringing doctors and nurses and administrators from where I work now to those campuses to kind of share their stories, answer questions, connect with shadowing and interning and all those kinds of things. So that's kind of how I try to influence that. I always talk about my experiences as a first gen student and the things that are going on the campuses, and then connecting those professionals and those people and their stories back to those students.
We
Can
keep hearing the theme of story.
Well, look, I also wanted to jump in. First of all, Mito, thank you, because you show up for everything, brother. I always appreciate you in all the different spaces. So good to see you here. But can I just say, if you all picked up on this vibe too, that was like such a killer interview answer, Mito, that you just gave. Like, if we all went in with that question in mind, like, how are you an influencer? And you might have those butterflies in your stomach. You're like, am I an influencer? I don't know. Man. Just forget all that and answer that question. Like, you came up with something so specific, so concrete, very detailed answers, like all that. So I think maybe that might be something for all of us to start to think about, like, quiet those voices in our head about how we aren't all these things. And if you see fools like George Santos who can just lie about their experiences and still get a job anyway, then what about the rest of us who've actually done some things and actually had accomplishments? So we need to keep that in mind too.
Well, and the idea too, Mito, that you are doing exactly what the research is telling us happens with first gen professionals, that we connect others together. We speak in stories. That's just kind of natural for us. When we're telling our first gen story, we're telling our family story. So that I love your little elevator pitch.
And Jose, I believe, wanted to go next.
Sure, thanks. Hello, everybody. Jose Rivas. I'm out in the San Francisco Bay Area on the East Bay side. I'm sort of retired from UC Berkeley after 20 years, and then after that I started. I took over a small nonprofit organization in San Francisco doing college access and success work, but I ended up stepping down from there, and so I'm currently jumped into a doctoral program at USC. So I'm doing an EDD program in organizational change and management, and what I'm looking at is specifically on first generation professionals. So what are the influences that help their transition into the professional career, and what are the systems and resources that they actually access and found to be helpful in their career transition. I think it started. I pivoted a few years ago. I had been in college access work before, like I said, and I started a program at UC Berkeley as part of the National College Advising Corps, and where we would take recent college graduates, 80-90% of them were first gen folks, and put them back into a school to help do college access work. But what I was finding is that it's a 2-year program. These folks were coming back and asking questions to me, to the directors, to their managers, to their supervisors about how do I do X, Y, and Z, whether it was from how do you pivot careers, how do you ask for a raise, how do you negotiate a salary, just, things that are just HR career type basis. And so I started a program with the intent of trying to get first gen folks into leadership positions And as I was starting to look at what was happening with these programs, I started trying to find what are the organizations, what is the research out there that's focusing on first gen professionals. So those folks that have gotten out of college. And so one of my professors, her take on it was, and it's exactly what I think is, once a first gen folks graduates from college, the thought is they've made it. They don't need any more help. They don't need any more support. So I wasn't finding any programs that was helping specifically first gen folks not only transition into their job, but how do you succeed once you get into that first professional organization? So I jumped into this doctoral program with that thought in mind. I'm at the end now, and I'm interviewing folks around those questions. And what I'm finding is it's a lot of it is connected to some of the research, but there are some nuances that I hadn't really thought about. I started talking to some of these folks and asking some of these research questions. So it's interesting. So I think for me, the idea of being an influencer, when the term came up first in this conversation, my first thought was social media influencer. And I'm kind of the old school generation that I get it, but I don't necessarily do it. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not a social media influencer, but how this conversation is going, I think is really interesting because I've never really thought of the work that I do or the conversations that I have as being a quote unquote influencer. I know we have impact on other people, but I've never thought of it as kind of from an influencer vibe. So it's interesting. It's definitely, I think, something else to add to the conversation.
Jose, you are an influencer. I mean, like when you started talking to people on this whole community, we're like giving you the high fives going across. So the other thing, I think something interesting is coming out of your conversation too, is the idea that people are doing research. They're in dissertation phases. Please, please, please try to publish your research. The journal for first generation students is a journal through the center. I know LT sits on the editorial board. I do as well. It's a great place to start if you're doing first gen student research, but certainly blogs, but getting a peer reviewed journal and getting research published is going to really help the narrative of first gen professionals.
Hey, Scotty, I just wrote this down. I'm thinking in a future session, we should focus on that topic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Look, I have a new Cricut. Do y'all know what a Cricut is? It's this like vinyl cutting machine. And I told LT for NASPA, I'm making several of us sweatshirts or t-shirts or whatever with something. I'm looking at it. Oh, I love that. All right. Thank you, Jose. Who's next?
I'm happy to jump in. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So my name is Casey. It's spelled like Cassie. It's confusing. It's a shout out to my immigrant parents. It's part of my first gen narrative. I use she, her pronouns. I'm out here in Oakland, California. And yeah, are you in Oakland? East Bay?
I'm in East Palo Alto, but so I'm close.
Okay, close. Yes, we're all in the storm here. Like Jose mentioned, I was part of the UC Berkeley Destination College alumni, or the UC Berkeley Destination College Advising Corps. And from that, Jose got a couple of us inspired and maybe some gentle nudges to start an alumni association. So all the advisors who served 2 years or a year afterwards, they were able to join this group. And so I was part of the founding group and stayed on for 6 years. And I joke with folks that was like the longest job I've had without getting paid, because usually I like don't stick on jobs for too long. Um, and and that was my small contribution to being an influencer. And I really love this question that you all posed out there, and also just want to give shout out to LT for naming that we are influencers in our various ways, and to think about it that way was quite empowering. And to hear what everyone else is doing like across the country is also so like uplifting. I've had a lot of Zoom meetings today that were not exciting, and this was the most exciting one so far. So thank you, Cynthia, for tagging me on this so that I can join today and join in on this conversation. And I will pause there to share space.
See, Jose, you're an influencer.
Yes,
And you're
yes.
creating influencers. Who
Well,
else?
we absolutely need that language though of influencing, creating, empowering, because we often have to do it. You know, we didn't see it. We're looking around like, where's the thing for me? Oh, I got to create this thing. And for many of us, we do it and kind of keep moving on, right? So taking some time to pause and acknowledge all the things that we've done, I think is really important.
Who else?
And as people are thinking, or we also want to know before our time ends, what are some future conversations and themes you would like to talk about? You can start if something comes to mind. Feel free to begin to put some of that in the chat too.
I think one thing, and LT knows, I've actually talked to her about this a little bit before, but specifically like as a young professional, and I've asked for some guidance on my campus also, but submitting things to conferences, I'm actually going to be submitting my first proposal to a conference this year, and I'm really nervous. Thank you for all the claps. That warms my heart so much. But just like how to like put yourself out there, even if it's not just like in the education realm of going to a conference, but just like how to, if you don't have a connection or someone who has a connection that can help you, like how do you put yourself, how do you be the first in that kind of space?
Isabel, I think that is such a big thread for me, because when I go to conferences, I become the wallflower because it's really awkward to break into conversations with people. Or I think of the people who are in charge of the conference as like superheroes, people who are untouchable. And it's really difficult for me to think about how to do that. I'm much better in the vendor area where I can go and ask vendors who maybe some of them grew up like I did, right? So, and my parents owned a very small independent hardware store, and we would go to the hardware conference. So I'm real comfortable in the vendor area. But when it comes to networking or putting myself out there with my actual peers, it's really difficult. So LT says she's writing that down.
Oh, I was responding to both things. Well, I had already written down what Isabel said, but Mito had also written in the chat, and I see this quite a bit too. And I talked to Eve Hudson about this quite a bit. About, oh yeah, you're passionate about the work. You're like, oh, you're willing to pay me $100 to talk, and many of us have to get out of that. And so Mito came up with another great topic in terms of how do you get paid your worth when you are presenting or doing a keynote. And I think we need a really candid conversation where people are willing to share those types of things. Like, how much do you charge? Like, where else are you going to learn that information?
Yeah. Well, also even negotiation skills in your career transitions. I've got a 30-year career in higher education, and I have yet to negotiate a salary. And so I think that is very important. very important.
I really like the idea of beyond like talking about the professional. I really like the idea of navigating spaces. I think even as its own standalone thing, that's something that would be really huge. Isabel, I was the wallflower, and then I got involved in some of the administrative stuff, and I found that the real conversations were not happening at the panels; they were happening at the breakfasts and lunches. I was the dork who I've been to all 50 states, but I've never seen outside of a Hilton at all of those 50 states because I'm always in panels. Like I keep a really full record so I can meet folks, both graduate students and other academics and also outsiders. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. I think like a navigating series would be on top of the other professions that would be really phenomenal.
Also, who are you, sir?
I'm so sorry. My name's Nick Zoffel. I am a retired professor who, with Lear Johansson, had an idea of having group spaces that were more effective, that could be more effective than Zoom and stuff like that. And I've had the privilege of knowing LaTanya for quite a bit of time now, and I finally tapped into the thing that she said yes to, which was coming here and helping to facilitate this conversation. And so yeah, I left academia for to be part of this startup. And our goal is to provide spaces for these kinds of conversations, because this for us is a mental health issue. It's not just simply a work issue, a professional issue. So for us, what first gen mental health looks like is going to be very different than what general practice mental health will look like, or BIPOC mental health, or LGBTQ plus mental health. And so I was really happy that LT said, I got it. Yeah, yes, we could. This is something that would be important, and we can make it happen. So that's who I am. I'm one of the guys behind the scenes who is helping to build a Better Day Groups, and really feels privileged and honored to be able to offer this space for y'all to do your magic in. Lear, you want to? Who are you? And
well, it's pretty hard to follow that, Nick. But yes, I joined with Nick, and my name is Lear Johansson. I'm in Petaluma, Northern California, and just thrilled to be able to work together with Nick and with LaTanya and Mary, and to sit down and listen to each of your stories, because I think that it's essential that we open and we break down silos and open up conversations so that we can enable folks to succeed. And for mental health, it comes in many different forms, but just listening to this conversation, I'm inspired to do a lot of things. And I'm not a first-gen student. Both my parents went to college, but I have to be honest with you, a lot of the struggles that I hear folks going through with are things that people like myself go through too. So even having the opportunity to sit in on these conversations gives me more confidence in the fact that we need to have more of these and bigger, and spread them around to more campuses, and enable these types of conversations to get folks the confidence and the information and the power they need to succeed.
Nick and Larry, what y'all are talking about too encompasses not just mental health, but well-being in general. And when I think about first generation professionals and the amount of navigation that we're doing, the types of things that we're having to decipher and sort of understand for ourselves, that idea of well-being, especially for first generation professionals, is very important, especially in workplaces and in which org culture is not necessarily caught up with some of the changes from COVID-19. And so, and let's be honest, never were really healthy to begin with. So I think it's really important for us to have space to talk about that. And I think Cynthia said, let's write it down, that we need to talk about this.
what's really funny is that that's actually what my book was about before I left higher education through Cognella, was on navigating higher education. And it was specifically designed as a text that could help students navigate those spaces, to navigate those spaces. And that's what led me ultimately into this kind of work as well. So yeah, so both my academic world and then my professional world have kind of come full circle in this way. So yeah.
Let's see if Michael or Heather have anything they want to ask or add or anything like that. Hey, Heather.
Hey, yeah, I can go. I'm just listening and observing and finding all these connections, which I love. And so I'm Heather. I am a director of TRIO Student Support Services STEM at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. I've been in higher ed now 8 years, I will say, first generation student. And like many others, I didn't know I was first gen until my master's program. And I am also doing my dissertation right now. So I was listening and ready, like, okay, LinkedIn, hold on, connect. So I am literally in chapter 4 of my dissertation. I am doing an autoethnography where I'm the primary researcher talking about being a first generation college student and now working in higher ed as a first gen professional. So the way I influence definitely is leading by example. Especially because I work with students who are majoring in STEM and they're first gen, and so that's a whole nother layer. We have students that are going to be nurses and doctors and engineers, and so for the longest time, I will say I was very quiet about me pursuing a doctorate degree because I was just like, I'm going to take it one semester at a time, and I'm not really going to, talk about it too much because I really don't know if I'm gonna, finish this and see it through. And as a director, I've learned that your students really need you, and they really need to hear that you're doing, what you're saying you're doing, and you're that example for them. And so, I found in working on my dissertation, right, my purpose is to serve first gen students, underrepresented students, and helping them get through higher ed. So I'm very thankful to be on this call, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to also connecting with a lot of y'all who are also in dissertation phase. So yeah, that is my my topic, I will say, of interest, definitely first gen doc students.
I wonder if another topic that's kind of coming out of that, Heather, I heard the word purpose. I don't know if you said it that way, but I heard purpose. And I wonder if another topic in the future would be living or engaging in careers of purpose. That's come up in a couple of spaces lately that I've been in, and I think that's an important conversation to have.
Definitely, yes.
Sorry, Mito and I are having some good conversation in the chat. I made a comment about first generation awareness. It was a project I stopped and dropped a while ago, but another reoccurring theme is folks saying, "Oh, I didn't realize I was first gen until grad school, until I encountered others working with students," and that's what I meant about this idea of first gen awareness. I think there's a lot of focus and emphasis on like the college application process, but I found that you can realize you're first gen anywhere in the pipeline. So some people will say, "I've always known I'm first gen," and then there are other folks. Mary, you mentioned you didn't realize till you were working in a TRIO program. So, and then Mito brought up the fact that even still, first gen often is associated with citizenship and immigration status, and people for whom that's not their story may say, well, that's not me, right? So yeah, there's so much nuance there. I guess I'll take this as a moment to get on a platform to say one of the things I really push for is conversations about first gen that have nothing to do with so-called continuing generation folks, because we always get compared and contrasted as opposed to our own stories. What is our story, right? It doesn't have to be what we did relative to someone else and what does our graduation rates look like compared to someone else. That's how the research has been, and we really need to move away from that and pay attention to what are we doing, what's unique and special about the first gen experience, recognizing there's so much heterogeneity, right? There's so much nuance to it. So that's what I'm really interested in.
That's a good point, LT. And I find myself doing that a lot. And I think it's a good reminder for us to understand, again, claim our story, claim our voice, our narrative. There is so much similarity that we find as we talk in spaces like this. Certainly there are differences. Again, it's not one size fits all, but there are certainly some things that are coming out that are so similar to what this narrative looks like. Michael, did you want to go, or you're good?
Yeah, I joined a little late, so I was mostly listening for a while. But the awareness thing, does kind of strike a chord. I've been in some conversations recently where, people will say, why should we focus on first gen when we can talk about ethnicity or this or that instead? And like it's there are common things that I'll point out because I'm at a community college, and I've been in institutional research now almost 23 years. So I just point out what our data show are the first gen usually makes more of a difference than those many of those other things anyway. And so it's also a less charged term in some way. So I think bringing those conversations, I think every meeting you go into, you can be listening and what is not being said, what is not being discussed. And had the conversation recently. Sometimes our faculty, we had these conversations in curriculum committee, which I'm not on, but I'll hear things that faculty will bring into the discussion their own children's experiences. Well, this, my son and daughter, came into the class and had this experience. Well, your son or daughter is not typical of our students. 60% of our students are first gen. Your son or daughter clearly is not. So those are kind of the, what is not being said. Listen to what is not being said, and how do we, when I say we, how do the people in the room differ from the students who we need to be speaking to and about?
Yes, Michael. Yes. I know that when my students find out I'm first gen, the first gen students say to me, I didn't know there were first gen professionals here. They don't say professionals. I didn't know anybody who worked here who was first gen, Or the other thing that I am starting to love this, is when I'm in a room with colleagues and we're talking about first gen and I say, I'm first gen, and somebody goes, I'm first gen. I'm first gen. And it's like this big community. You're first gen too. Like it's starting to become this really, this experience of celebration and understanding. It's like you catch each other's eyes and you understand it means something. There's a particular way it means. And Michael, I think you're exactly right. That idea of, well, my child's, whatever, and they're sitting there college educated saying that curriculum meetings, that's a very different experience from a child who's coming from a first gen family.
Well, one of the things I like to see, sorry, I don't know if there's feedback. I clearly this conversation about first gen identity takes hold in higher education spaces. Would like to see in the future where we're talking about like first gen professionals outside of that industry. And so maybe Mary, if folks can recommend people that they're leading the way. Also, we have to avoid the other extreme, like, oh, this is what Google is doing, and this is what Amazon is doing. Do you know how many people are first gen that work at Google? Not that many. So if we could, anyway, not to say it's not important, but I'd love to hear about this experience outside of higher ed as well.
Yeah. I was so encouraged to hear from my sister that as a nurse, she was starting to propose mentoring projects to the state of Louisiana for first gen nurses. And I thought, I wouldn't have thought about that because I've been in higher ed so long, but I think about how that might look for somebody who is in the nursing profession. And I know that a lot of us, I say a lot of us, I don't know this for sure, but my father gave me two options for careers, nurse or teacher. And so I think about those two professions and think about how many first gens are in those professions and what that looks like for those outside of higher ed. LT, there are probably a lot of pockets that exist out there. I'm sorry, Isabel, go ahead.
That's okay, Mary. Just talking about how like it still exists even outside of higher education. Like I noticed with my fiance, he works for Travis County, the county that we live in, and even he like feels the same things that I feel. And I work with a lot of people who are first gen, and he doesn't. And so recognizing that even though we're
Exactly.
surrounded by other first gen people, we still are struggling, and like trying to make it known to other people who aren't first gen, especially like in his area. And he like works in sustainability, which is a very like white woman like career field, and he's a black man. He's an Afro-Latino man, and so like
Mm.
that is it's very different on a lot of layers. But like just how do you even go about that process, because not only did you deal with it like through college, but like in an office when nobody else knows what that means, and just it's very different. It's very interesting.
And just want to add, 'cause I also have to run, but in thinking about the people that we serve in those roles, so like here at the federally qualified health clinic that I work at, a lot of the clients and patients we serve are exactly like my parents. So it's easier for me to communicate and relate and understand what their fears are, or kind of the ideas they have around doctors and nurses, because I grew up with that. Whereas somebody else who grew up with 3, 4, 5 generations of college educated folks can't understand the clients and the patients they serve, because they've never been in a world and experienced those stereotypes or those ideas or those languages or words. So even us as professionals, it gives us an advantage to we can diversify populations. If we're working in sales, if we're entrepreneurs, we know what populations that what they need and what we want to provide for them. So I think there's a lot of advantages that we have as first gens that we can share and communicate, if provided the opportunity, or if we create those opportunities to be able to share. And that's something else to talk about.
Thank you, Mito. We're getting all this down. LT's taking official notes. I'm scratching down my chicken scratch. And this has been such an incredible conversation. I know we're coming to the end of our time together for today. LT, I'm going to toss it over to you just to kind of talk about maybe next steps, thoughts about, where we'll come together again.
Yeah, again, I want to thank everyone. People always underestimate the power of the first followers, right? Like you see this thing and you actually showed up, because like I told you at the beginning, it's those folks who are here today that's actually going to shape what we do going forward. Mary and I were thinking of, potentially like a monthly conversation like this, where we have, guests that come and talk about, hey, how do you go about creating employee resource group for first gens at a company, right? Or we'll talk about mental health. So have some folks come in, but really Mary and I really see ourselves as conveners, and so feel free to reach out to us. You all know I'm on LinkedIn all day long, so you feel free to message me there. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, or what have you. So if you have a spark of an idea, feel free to let us know, and we look forward to bringing it to you on this platform. I think there's so many directions, and I say all the time, there's room for everyone. There's room for everyone. And so we hope that this is just one space. And if you go and take it and go in another direction, that's awesome too. We love that.
We're shaping the conversation.
I just want to add, on behalf of Better Day Groups, thank you so much for giving your time. LT, Mary, thank you for convening this and letting us host the platform, and thank you to everybody who showed up. You've given us a ton of information, so that way we can ensure that what is built will provide use for y'all. And then, as LT said, as the next generation, you're sort of the test group, and then hopefully you'll come back and you'll help be advocates and evangelists for these additional conversations. So thank you so very much.
We'll be in touch, everyone. Thank you. Keep influencing. Absolutely.
That's right. That's right.